Good morning, everyone. I'm Lindsay Broom. I'm the NOFA Evaluation Coordinator here at the Housing Department, and I am the administrator, basically, of the NOFA process. So if you have questions about the application or questions about the NOFA itself, like how, to submit your application, I'm the contact person, and I'll share my contact information later on in the presentation. I am going to allow Melody to kind of give the welcome and to address the program overview and kind of the nuts and bolts of the NOFA. Let me share my screen so I can pull up the NOFA.
Well, she's doing that. Good morning. Happy New Year. It is great to see so many people on the screen and in attendance. I am turning off my my chats so that I don't get too distracted. But so welcome. So we are here because you have are interested in our notice of funding availability for our public services program. And so we're just going to go through it like we normally do. For those who have been through this NOFA process with me before, I always get nervous because I feel like it's so boring. But at the end of this, we will have an opportunity to answer questions. We have had a few questions already come in, and so we will try to make sure we answer those at the end of the presentation. So this NOFA was issued on Thursday, December 22nd, so right before Christmas. However, we wanted to ensure that everyone had enough time, and so we waited for this particular application conference to happen after the holidays. But we did want to get it out for anybody who wanted to go ahead and read on it. So we are here today. The application question deadline is going to be Thursday, January 17th. 2023 at 5 p.m. So any questions you have, please submit them by that time. You will be submitting them to Lindsay Broom, and her information is listed below. The solicitation due date, which means this application is due no later than February 2nd, 2023 at 3 p.m. That is a Thursday, and 3:01 is too late. If you submit that application after 3 o'clock and it's stamped after 3 o'clock, you have not met threshold and your application will not be reviewed. So please note that, put like it for you, put it due at 1 o'clock p.m. that day. Make it early. We have had situations in the past and other NOFAs that people submit at 3:03, 3:17. It is not going to be reviewed because you will have been, if we were to review it, we would have then severely compromised our NOFA process, and nobody wants that.
Yeah, and this year will be a little bit different, which we'll go into more detail later. I think Lindsay's going to go into an explanation for the on-base portal, and that will timestamp your submission.
And who is this guy talking? I probably should introduce him earlier. This is Jared Briggs. He is the division manager for public services, and he's going to take on a different portion of the presentation.
Good morning, everyone.
So the NOFA summary, our department is seeking nonprofit organizations, which we call the applicants or agencies, must have a 501c3 nonprofit status, and it must be active. We are asking that these nonprofit providers provide public services programs to our Houston residents, including but not limited to, and we listed some important, what we feel are mostly important, transportation, healthcare, medical, education, housing and/or rehousing, mental health, case management, homeless services, legal services, housing counseling, employment, substance abuse counseling, job training and education and workforce development, childcare services. This is a non-exhaustive list, but this is sort of what we're looking for. If you are an organization that is providing something outside of that, it doesn't mean that you're not, that you're prohibited from applying. Please apply. It will be evaluated. The term of the resulting agreements will be for a 1-year term, so 12 months with a 1-year option to extend at the discretion of our department. So if everything's going well, like the first 9 months, we will contact you and say, hey, we're ready to do an extension. All projects must meet CDBG eligibility requirement. So if you're not familiar with CDBG public services eligibility requirements, my suggestion is to Google that and start reading the regulations on that. This, what she's going through is a table of contents. You should already have this information downloaded, and if you don't, you can go to our website to get it.
Sorry.
And so really, that was a summary. I'm on page 3, and that's okay. This talks a little bit about the Community Development Block Program. Specifically, what I want you to pay attention to is the 3rd paragraph, which is that all CDBG funded activities must meet at least one of the 3 national objectives defined in the authorizing statute of the CDBG program. All projects that are related to public services must benefit low to moderate income persons. So that LMI, which is at 80% of the area of medium income or below. Public services projects do not, it's very, very rare. And as long as I've been here, I've never seen them meet the preventing or eliminating slum and blight, nor meeting an urgent need. So when you do your project, you must make sure it benefits low and moderate income persons, 80% of the area of median income or below. All activities funded through the City of Houston, our public services program, are required to benefit the low and moderate income population earning less than 80%. Projects that fail to meet this applicable eligibility criteria will not be funded. And so when we look at the funding, we are looking at approximately $4.5 million to award, give or take some. So this is an approximation. It doesn't mean that we're going to fund all $4.5 million, but that's what we have right now that we're looking at funding. And this is through a series of different funding streams. So in addition to the CDBG Community Development Block Grant Public Services activity, we're also looking at possibly including our Emergency Solutions Grants, our Homeless Housing and Services Program, which is a state grant commonly referred to as HHSP, the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone, which is our TERS funding, and any other funding available to HCD that manages and can support our public services activity. So it's not an exhaustive list, and we typically do blend funding depending on what the program is proposing. So what you see here, which is on page 4, is the solicitation schedule. Please put that in your calendars. Make sure you have flags for that so that you know we've already passed, to those dates, but that application question date and of course the solicitation due date is the ones that you really want to pay attention to. Great. Am I doing this one too?
Yes.
Okay. So here's part 2, which is the scope of work. And we talked about the purpose, we talked about the different activities, and we talked about the timeliness. We talked about the money, the $4.5 million approximately, and the different funding streams. What you see there is activities eligible for CDBG public service funds. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, but typically if your program falls within one of those categories, it will be eligible. So the next page, that brings us to the evaluation and selection process, because I believe someone else is doing that.
Yeah, that's me.
Oh, that's you. Okay, great. I'll go on mute.
So as part of the evaluation process, we have a evaluation committee. It's usually anywhere from 3 to 5 members, 2 housing members and 1 outside from a different department reviewer. If the city decides to, they can ask that applicants provide a final presentation and do a interview or oral presentation. The selection process itself, the city intends to select applicants that best meet the needs of the city and that provides the best overall value. The city reserves the right to check references on any projects performed by the applicant, whether provided by the applicant or just known by the city. The funding will be distributed to applicants based on applicants that meet or exceed the minimum points, starting with the highest score. After allocating funding based on highest scores, if there are insufficient funds to allocate the next applicant, the city may request that the applicant lower its funding request. skip that applicant and award the next applicant whose funding request does not exceed available funding, or choose not to award the remaining funding under this NOFA. The city may continue the steps 1 through 3 with each next applicant. And so, as part of the evaluation, there are threshold or minimum requirements. So after you submit your application, I will do what I call a threshold review, and I will look to see that all 10 of these requirements have been met. So I'm just going to read those because these are really important. And if you don't meet these minimum requirements or provide documentation that shows you meet these minimum requirements, your application will not be reviewed. So the first is that the applicant must not be debarred or suspended or otherwise excluded or ineligible for participating in federally funded programs. The program must meet one of the CDBG national objectives, as Melody discussed previously, and also qualify under the public service eligible activities. Note that all activities funded through the City of Houston Public Services Program are required to benefit a majority of low to moderate income persons earning less than 80% AMI. The applicant must respond to the needs of the city as outlined in the Housing and Community Development Department's 2021 through 2024 Consolidated Action Plan. And we've provided a link where you can look at that action plan. You must provide a certificate of account status from the Texas Comptroller, and also your current 501c3 tax exempt status. So as Melody mentioned earlier, this particular NOFA is only available to those who have the 501c3 status. The applicant must operate business and serve residents located within the City of Houston city limits. The applicant must be able to provide evidence of site control for the duration of the agreement, and that would be a deed or a lease. The funding request must be at least $100,000 and maximum $250,000. Applicants must document 3 months cash flow operating capital reserve, i.e. a line of credit, bank statements, or something similar, available for use by the proposed program. And finally, the board of directors must certify that 3-month cash flow reserve.
If I can just interject really quick,
Sure.
For P1, the applicant must not be debarred or suspended. Your agency can go to SAMS.gov and see if that is, if you're not debarred. If you do not have a SAMS.gov account, you will need to get a SAMS.gov account. Is that correct?
Yeah, SAM.gov, System for Award Management. You can Google it. If you're not familiar with it, then that will be a requirement for us to work with you. It's a requirement for all agencies to receive federal funds, and it must be active. So you may have one, you may have had one. Make sure you check your status and make sure it's still active and it's not about to expire. Because if it expires, then again, we won't be able to work with you until it's active.
And so that will delay your projects. And some of our current agencies that are currently funded have run into that issue already with like renewals, anytime we go to city council. And then to clarify for T2, when we talk about majority, that's 51% or higher. Your program must benefit the majority, 51% or higher of low and moderate income persons.
And if you have questions about what documentation you need to provide for each of those, if it's before that question deadline on January 17th, you can call me or email me, and I will help you think through that and make sure you have the right documentation. Oops, okay. Okay, now I think we're going to move on to scoring criteria.
Okay.
Now he's good.
Yeah, I'll go over the scoring criteria section. So it's fairly straightforward. As stated, the maximum points allowable is 110 points as part of this NOFA. We'll go through each section quickly. It breaks it down, the maximum score that you can receive. Management. So that's just going to be an organization chart, the narrative. You're going to show us in that, in the proposal, how does this fit into your overall agency framework? It's going to show your organizational structure as long as including a narrative. Where does it fit? Identifies the staff positions and who's responsible for carrying out this program. If you have staff positions that are vacant or proposed, but they would only be filled if you're awarded, make sure you note that in the organizational chart. And if you have current staff that you're going to assign, we like to see, what the staffing requirements are and if you have people already on hand or if you need to hire. The target services, that's a maximum of 5 points. So you're going to tell us what you're requesting funds to serve eligible LMI residents with one or more of the following activities. So if you are doing something that is related to mental health services, employment services, job training and education services, or workforce development, you can receive 2.5 points for that. So like I said, we have some services from that larger list that Melody mentioned earlier that we are targeting. If the applicant is requesting to serve homeless persons in conjunction with a housing placement through the Way Home, which is the local continuum of care, for one or more of the following activities for homeless services or case management services, then you can receive 2.5 points for being one of those 2 activities.
So this is important to know. This is in conjunction with housing placement. So if you're just doing some kind of work with the homeless community, but housing is not a component of it, it will not count for those 2.5 points.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. S3, so the activity need and justification. So as it states, you're going to tell us, the problem statement, what is the need, and what's the tie back to the consolidated plan. So it's mentioned above on, I believe it's T3, where you can find the information about the city's 2021 through 2024 consolidated plan. This is a max of 15 points. So the activity will be evaluated in terms of documentation and justification of the need for the activity. So you can get up to 10 points for that. And then the consolidated plan priority. So we have goals and objectives in that plan. And the proposed activity would address a high priority item identified by the city's consolidated plan. So that's a maximum of 5 points. S4, cost reasonableness and effectiveness, up to 10 points for this section. So we're going to look at the activities that you're proposing and evaluate them on the impact on the identified need, the implementation cost, and the funding request that's relative to its financial and human resources. So this will include the cost that's incurred per person per unit. So we're going to look at what is the cost per person that you're serving. So if it might be, you're going to serve 100 individuals with X number of sessions of training, what does that break down to? But we're also going to look at the overall cost reasonableness. Does it seem, excessive, or does it seem very low? I mean, that is where we're going to get into, we can only go with the information that you provide us. So the more details that you can squeeze in to the to the proposal, the better.
And so I will just make a comment on this cost reasonableness because it has come up in the past. When you look at your budgets with any of our programs, is this reasonable? Are you looking at the salary cost across, the like salary wages in the industry?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you comparing them to? If you're doing some type of counseling service, what is the average cost per counseling unit? And is that what you're essentially trying to get reimbursed for? So how did you come up with these numbers? That's what we're looking for. It is going to vary based on the type of program and project you have. So every project that is submitted is going to be different. It's not identical, and we are aware of that.
And note, while it's not so much a cost reasonableness issue, we will be looking at your salaries for any staff that are funded. And if they're funded with grant funds, City of Houston funds, then they do have to have a minimum of $15 an hour. S5, the data-driven evaluation, so up to 15 points. So we want to see how you are going to provide data that demonstrates the need for the program. It's not, we just feel that there's, that it's, you have a feeling that there's a need for the program. What data have you collected? What needs have you identified in the community? What evidence can you provide us that this approach is needed and that it's likely to be effective and to provide a significant opportunity when we say to advance the field, to serve others, to meet a need that's not currently being met, to not duplicate an existing service, or if it is duplicating an existing service, is that service maxed out and now you're providing additional capacity and there is a need out there. You've done an analysis that shows we need to serve more people. These are other service providers. They have no more capacity and therefore we're now going to fill this gap. The points will be awarded to applicants based on the documentation that they provide. And as I said, demonstrates that this program is effective and will achieve the impact described. It's also, we're looking at how does it best leverage the funding for the city and the taxpayers. S6, experience and past performance. So this is about the introduction, organizational capacity and capability, up to 10 points. So points will be awarded based on the experience of the applicant, including the previous work with the city funds or other agencies that provide similar funding or programs. You may not have experience working with the city, which is fine. The length of time the organization has been in existence or serving individuals, and the experience in undertaking projects of similar complexity. In addition to that, the applicant will be awarded points based on their past performance, as I said, with other agencies, local, state, and federal funding programs. If you've worked with other federal agencies, other state programs, make sure you tell us that. Past performance will refer to the attainment of objectives in a timely manner and expenditure of funds at a reasonable rate in compliance with the contract. We're actually going to be doing agreements. Contract's a holdover. Compliance will include, but not limited to, timely submission of reports, reimbursement requests, and its adherence to the scope of services. And that's really important for us, your past performance, either with the city or other agencies, because we rely on the timely submission of reports for our reporting to HUD so that we can process your reimbursement requests. We've asked for that 3 months minimum of cash flow so that we, keep that funding flowing to the agency, as well as we expend our funds in a timely manner. And again, for those that have not received city funding from the Housing and Community Development Department in the past, allocation of points up to the maximum of 2 points will be awarded, dependent upon how thorough the documentation of similar past performance submitted with the application. S7, your leveraging contribution. So this will come from the detailed budget, which is one of the attachments that you should download, to up to 15 points. So this is going to document your efforts to secure other funding, and those points will be awarded based on the evidence that you submit to us in the application of your efforts to secure other funding for the activity that you're proposing. So leveraging, the points will be awarded on the scale below. If you have a 1-to-1 match or higher for the amount that you're requesting, then you can receive 15 points, and then it drops off with, if you have less than 25% match or leverage, you get 0 points. So leverage or match is not required, but we do incentivize or reward those that have some form of additional leverage in their proposed program.
And so on this particular one, it is very important that you fill out your budget completely and accurately. Many times in the past, we see how someone will request, $100,000, and when it looks at other funding, the other funding column is all 0. Well, then that means you're going to get 0 points, because that's where we're taking this particular leverage. There are other places within the application where you'll show some additional leverage or the backup, but if you don't have it on that budget, it cannot be pulled in for this calculation. I'd also like to just state that this is a tiebreaker. So in the event of a tiebreaker, the entity that has more leverage will prevail in that tiebreak. All right, so we'll go to S8, budget effectiveness.
All right. Again, this section, maximum of 10 points. So this is where we're going to look at the budget and evaluate it on the following: the extent to which the program supports the scope of services. So this is where you want to make sure your amounts, your FTEs, what you're describing in the narrative and the scope of services to be provided is consistent with what's in the budget. So accuracy, consistency are key. What is the work plan? The program objectives and plans that demonstrate the capacity to perform the proposed activities in the business plan. So again, what is in your budget? Is it matching what you're describing? Do you have a reasonable number of staff? Do you have a reasonable number of other resources that you may need, equipment? If this is all a brand new program and you're starting from scratch, then you should have in your budget staff, you should have equipment, you should have office supplies, unless that's something you're going to provide as leverage and you have other funding. Again, we talked about the cost reasonableness. We want realistic cost estimates and reasonableness. Again, this is a proposal, so do your best. It should be based in reality or other, comparable sources. But again, it is just your best, the best information that you can provide us. Completeness and accuracy, I think we've harped on that enough. And then plans for contribution of services following the discontinuation of funding. So that is one thing we always want to find out is, so we can fund this if you're selected for a year, 2 years potentially. What is your plan? Are you going to go out and seek other resources to continue the program? Will the program end once the City of Houston's funding expires? What is the long-term plan to continue to provide this service to residents? S9, the accessible location. So that's up to 5 points. So you're going to describe to us the accessibility of the proposed location where your services are going to be provided and how the applicant and how you'll address the transportation needs for clients to be served. So this is going to get to the physical location of where services are to be provided. Is that located within a half mile of a light rail line, high frequency bus route, or a transportation service such as, and here we reference like Healthcare for the Homelessness Project Access? If so, you can get up to 5 points. If the physical location is within half mile of public transportation, but say it's a non-high frequency bus route, up to 3 points. And then if you're more than a half mile from any form of public transit, then you will get 0 points for this section. So this is where you'll need to provide us where your information, clear address, where you're providing that service. We'll turn it over to our GIS team. When we get these proposals, they'll map it out for us and they'll provide us information on where you fall, how close you are to the data that they have on Metro. S10, agency collaboration, up to 5 points. So this is where you'll tell us, are you collaborating with others that support or enhance care for your targeted population? For that, you have to provide documents that document that collaboration on the agency's letterhead. So who are your partners? And you'll have to have some form of letter of support or an MOU, depending on what you have. And it has to be on the agency's letterhead. And it has to, we prefer that it have a signature from someone who have authority with the agency that says, we agree to support this application or we'll work with this agency.
And it should be within 12 months of the application submission date. So if you don't have that or it's older than 12 months, you need to go get a new one. It isn't, you have 10 and that's amazing. I just think they need to be some of your stronger collaborations and how they impact this program. So if you have, a collaboration with an agency and has nothing to do with your program, then it doesn't really matter to us because it does show that you work with other agencies. How does it impact this particular program?
And here is the, everyone should get 5 points if you do it correctly for the application submission. So you'll get up to 5 points if you clearly label and separate your files according to the checklist and upload those into the on-base NOFA portal in the required and relevant fields. And Lindsay will go over this more. Again, this is something new that we're using for this cycle, the on-base NOFA portal. So we'll go into more detail on that. S12, so here's how we get to 110 bonus points. So 10 points will be given to proposals where the service delivery is located in a complete community. So there's a link there to the complete community's website. There's 10, Acres Home, A-Leaf Westwood, Fort Bend, Houston, Gulfton, Cashmere Gardens, Magnolia Park, Dash Manchester, near Northside, 2nd Ward, Sunnyside, or 3rd Ward. If you're not sure the boundaries of those, when you're on the Complete Communities website, there's a community plan for each one of those areas. And you can open up that community plan, and on one of the first few pages is a map that shows the boundaries of complete communities. Again, just like with the accessibility, we'll turn that over to our GIS team based on the service delivery location, and they'll map that for us and whether or not it falls within the complete community. Now, it may be that the actual service delivery location may be very close, but if you tell us what your service area is and you say, hey, we do within a half mile or we do these zip codes and you're serving that area, then we would give you points because you are serving. You don't have to always be located in, but as long as you are serving or targeting that area, then you would get those additional 10 points.
And just for the record, if you say, well, we serve everyone in the city of Houston, that's not gonna fly. It's really where you're targeting. Most all, if not all, applicants will be serving anyone within the city of Houston, but as you know, you do target particular areas. All right, well, continue.
Turn it over to
Lindsay?
Lindsay on the next section, I believe.
Hi. Okay. I'm going to go over the application process and requirements. And I think because this will be your first time going through this new process, it's best to, pay close attention to the changes. And the main one being that we use the portal now rather than a paper application. So I will share my screen and show you how to do that. I'm just going to kind of go over these nuts and bolts of the process first. The first is the pre-application conference, which we're having now. And this recording will be posted on the City of Houston Housing website, and I'll show you that website in a second. So you can watch it after this if you need to go back and find out more details. In addition, you can submit questions to me at lindsay.broom@houstontx.gov. And one of the applicants prospective applicants kindly pointed out that we have a typo on this page. It says no later than 5 p.m. January 20th, 2023 for the questions, and that should be January 17th. So I will issue a letter of clarification stating that and post it to the website. So it's best to have all your questions in written format in an email so that I'm able to share those with the letter of clarification. You can also call me, but I just prefer the writing. That way we have documentation and it's easier to track the questions as well. Letter of the clarification is it's basically a document where we take all the questions that we receive and then we post them publicly so that all prospective applicants can see the questions and the answers so that everyone has a equal chance at reading the information and helping them in their application process. The city does not assume responsibility for the receipt of any clarification sent to applicants. So basically, it's posted to the website, and it is your responsibility to keep checking. So up until the day before the applications are due, I would go onto the website and make sure there's no new letters of clarification because you don't want to miss any information. This required application content is essentially your application checklist, and I will go into this in extensive detail in just a few minutes. Each applicant shall carefully examine all NOFA documents and familiarize themselves with all requirements prior to submitting an application. So because this process has changed, I do suggest giving yourself extra time. I would not wait until the day before it's due to try to gather your documents or try to figure out the on-base portal. I would do that well ahead of time in case any questions come up and you do need to reach out to me. So you may want to go ahead and look at that before that question deadline, which is the 17th, to see if you have any questions that need to be submitted. Before applying, each applicant shall be responsible for making all investigations and examinations that are necessary to ascertain conditions and affecting the requirements of the NOFA. Failure to make such investigations and examinations shall not relieve the applicant from obligation to comply in every detail with all provisions and requirements of the NOFA. It is the city's intent to commence final negotiation with the applicants deemed most advantaged to the city. The city reserves the right to conduct post-application discussions with any applicants. Okay, so the instructions for applications is applications will only be received through the hyperlink here, the on-base portal. Paper applications received in person or by email will not be accepted. So that's the biggest takeaway, is that you must use the portal. The city shall bear no responsibility for submitting applications on behalf of any applicants. Applicants may submit their application through the hyperlink provided anytime prior to the stated deadline. And as Melody mentioned previously, the system does timestamp the receipt of the application. So you need to make that 3 p.m. deadline, and applications after the 3 p.m. deadline will not be accepted. That's the next bullet point. Format is Arial 12 font, double spaced. page limitations, if they apply, should be adhered to, and that would be in the NOFA itself. It would have specify if there's a page limitation. Applicants are advised to carefully review all of the requirements and submit all documents and information as indicated in this NOFA. Incomplete applications may lead to an application being deemed non-responsive. Non-responsive applications will not be considered. Applicants remain responsible for ensuring that its application is received at the date, time, and hyperlink specified. The city assumes no responsibility for any application not received, regardless of whether the delay is caused by some other act or circumstance. There's one thing I wanted to go over before I start showing you the portal, and that is the no contact period, which has already begun. So neither the applicants nor any person acting on applicant's behalf shall attempt to influence the outcome of the award by the offer, presentation, or promise of gratuities, favors, or anything of value to any appointed or elected official or employee of the city, their families, or staff members. All inquiries regarding the application are to be directed to the designated city representative identified on the first page of the NOFA. So in this case, that would be me. So moving forward, no one should be contacting anyone at the city or any elected official regarding this NOFA unless it goes through me as the NOFA evaluator. So if you have a question about the program or the NOFA that I'm unable to answer, I will forward those questions to Melody and Jared and get a response, but you need to go through me rather than going directly to Melody or Jared. The exception of the applicant's formal response to the application and written request for clarification during the period officially designated for such purpose by the city representative, neither applicants nor persons acting on their behalf shall communicate with any appointed or elected official or employee of the city, their families, or staff through any written or oral means in an attempt to persuade or influence the outcome of the award, or to obtain or deliver information intended to or which could reasonably result in an advantage to any applicant from the time of issuance of the application through the pre-award phase and up to the date the city secretary publicly posts notice of any city council agenda containing the applicable award. However, nothing in this paragraph shall prevent an applicant from making public statements to the city council convened for a regularly scheduled session after the official selection has been made and placed on the city council agenda for action, or to a city council committee convened to discuss a recommendation regarding the application. So that's all just legalese for saying don't try to change the outcome of the award in any way by reaching out to any city employee. And then I do suggest reading through this Part 5 special conditions. These are all, rules, regulations, things that apply to the NOFA. I'm not going to go through all of them because it's quite lengthy, but I do suggest reading through it on your own. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you and walk you through the application process. So most of you should have already visited the Housing Community Development website before. If you go onto the website, HoustonTexas.gov/housing, and you go down to For Businesses, Funding Contract Opportunities, and you scroll down to the Housing Department Funding, Notice of Funding Availability. So you click there, and it pulls up all of our current NOFAs. So the one that you are interested in by attending this conference is the Public Services NOFA. This is where you'll be getting all of your information. The first tab is to view the actual NOFA. So what this pulls up is our city's procurement division's website. And on that website, it has a link to the NOFA, the first document, which you probably have already seen. We also have posted the budget template, which pulls up an Excel file, and that is what you're going to use to complete your budget. And also we provided a detailed project budget instruction. So this you should definitely read before you do your budget template because it'll walk you through how to complete the budget. And as Jared mentioned, that is something that is a scoring criteria. So you want to make sure that you do it correctly and that you don't miss any information. So there's another way you can look at the budget and the other required documents, and that is by clicking View Applicable NOFA Documents. And you'll see this table pops up down here. And again, we have the same document here, the detailed project budget instructions. And then we have every document that you'll need when you're completing the application. So I'm going to start with this Public Services NOFA application checklist. So I would think of this document as one of the most important because it is the guide for completing your application. Okay, so this is the application checklist, and this is going to walk you through everything that is required of you as you are putting together your application. So you have the checklist, which is this. Then you have a title page. You have your proposal content and project narrative. So this is kind of the meat of your application. Everything that Jared's discussed, or most everything that Jared discussed in the scoring criteria, needs to be included in this kind of proposal content and project narrative. It has your problem statement, it has your description of program services. So if I were you, I would make sure that you go through the scoring criteria matched up with this proposal content and project narrative and make sure that you're touching each scoring criteria within the body of this document. The other big piece of this is the public services budget application. So that must be submitted in an Excel format. So you download that form that I showed you previously, that Excel file, and then you fill it out yourself based on your information, save it, and then we'll upload it to the portal. Many of these other documents that you see below that are required forms. So accounting system certification, security policy, certification regarding location, facilities, and shelters. I'm not going to go through each one of them because there is quite a few forms, but they all need to be completed, and they all are present on that housing NOFA page. And as was mentioned previously, you do need to make sure you have your sam.gov unique entity ID and registration, and that it's current. We have conflict of interest questionnaires. There's one, the city form, and there's also the HCD conflict of interest form that need to be completed.
Just a note for the conflict of interest forms, they must be completed. If there is no conflict present, it must be completed.
Okay.
So there is no like, oh, this is not applicable, we don't have a conflict. Every conflict of interest form must be completed. If there is no conflict, you need to note that and it needs to be signed.
Okay. Yeah, we can take that if applicable off. That way so people won't be confused that they need to do it regardless. Your list of board of directors, your articles of incorporation, bylaws, 2 recent 2 years financial audits or balance sheet and income statements, your org chart and narrative, certificate of occupancy, conflict of interest policy. So that one is a new internal policy that we want all of our agencies that we work with to have their own conflict of interest policy. So if you don't have one of those, you do need to write one and have it approved by your board before you apply. Licenses. We did have a lot of questions about that on a previous NOFA. Jared, do you mind talking about the licenses? Because I know that was a big question last time.
Yeah, so it would be if you have any staff or you're providing any type of medical services, or if you are providing basically any service that requires a licensure, then we would want to see that the staff that's providing those services is certified with the state or whatever applicable agency. It's one of those that, through the evaluation process, we may, or, it may not be clear. So if you've got a
LCDC, a licensed social
yeah,
worker.
if you want to elaborate,
Yeah, so if on your budget you're like, we're going to hire 4 licensed social workers, and this is what it's going to cost us, or we have 4 licensed social workers, and this is what it's costing. We want to see those licenses. If it's going to be hired, obviously you won't have a license for someone you don't know you're going to hire. But that's what we're looking for.
And then finally, the anti-discrimination policy. Every agency that we work with should have an anti-discrimination policy that is
And
part of
this
their
is
policy.
not your EEOC documents, like your equal opportunity. We hire everyone. That is great. That is the law. I'm so happy you have that. What we are looking for is that we do not discriminate from anybody who comes into our facility to access services. We want to see that. Most agencies do not have this. So if you do not have this, you need to create one and get it approved. So this is, you know, most agencies or all agencies that we work with do not discriminate against individuals coming in for services. We want to see it in writing.
Oh, the next session is the threshold requirements. As I mentioned, these are required in order for your project to be reviewed. This is a way to for me to easily do the threshold review. So just providing documentation for each one that I can see inside the portal to make sure that you meet those threshold requirements. And we've already went over these 10 things right here, but there will be a spot in the portal where you upload the documentation. And again, if you're like, I don't know what documentation to provide for this, please reach out to me and I will walk you through that. Okay, let me go back to the portal. Okay, and as you can see here inside the website in this view applicable NOFA documents, as you're going through that checklist and you're like, I don't know what this form is, the form should be here in this list. So you can just click on, say, security policy, and it will come up and you can complete it, and then you're going to upload it. If for some reason you find a form that's not there, please let me know as soon as possible so that I can correct that. Like I said, this is a new process, so we're always trying to work out the kinks. So if you've come across anything that doesn't seem right, please just reach out to me so that I can get it corrected. So the third tab here is the actual document submittal portal. So you go to this portal, you can say our documents for a NOFA submission. You must select yes, or it won't populate below. And then a very important thing is right here where it says, please enter project or solicitation number. You have to get that number correct or it will not populate correct. So this one is T32602, and you can find that at the top of the NOFA. And as soon as you put that number in, you can see that it goes ahead and populates some of the information. So if you don't see it populate that, then you have done something incorrectly. So make sure that as soon as you put the number in, you see Public Services Program come up. And then you put in your project name, your project address, zip, and your organization information. Please make sure that you put a contact email and contact phone number of someone who is going to be easily available for me. If it's somebody who's always out of the office and doesn't check their email, that's not good, because if there's any issue with the application, I'll need to contact that person in a short time turnaround. So just make sure it's someone that is going to be available. And then below you can see the area to upload your documents. So every document that I pointed out on that checklist, you will see here on the portal. So here's where you'll put your checklist. You click that and you come to your information and you pick your document. Title page, every single one, they're all outlined individually. So it should be, although it'll take some time to get used to the system, it should make it easier because you can clearly see if you've forgotten something because there won't be an attachment there. And at the bottom, don't forget to do this because this is also really important, is the threshold requirements. So for each threshold requirement, I need you to upload some type of documentation that shows that you met that threshold requirement. And then at the bottom, it has submit. Now, I just want to give you some words of caution with using this portal. It will time out if you leave it open for too long. We've talked to our administrator, I don't have like a time limit of what is too long, but what I can say is that when you sit down to do the documentation and upload it, do it all at once. Don't do some, then get up from your computer and go do something else, or switch screens and start working on something else, because it will eventually time out. And I don't know exactly how long that is. So I wouldn't risk it, because you could lose all the information that you've already uploaded. So sit down, have everything ready, everything in a folder that way you can easily access it, and then just go through each one, uploading them, and then hit submit. You should receive an email from the system that says it's been submitted. If you do not, please contact me as soon as possible so that I can go into the system and check and make sure that we have received your application. And as I said previously, it does timestamp it, so make sure that you're not waiting until 3 p.m. to do that application upload. I would do it much earlier in the day, let's say 1 p.m. or something like that. That way you give yourself plenty of time in case there's some kind of technical glitch, which we all know there can be from time to time. One other thing I want to say, let me stop sharing. There is what we call a cure period. So when I do the threshold review, if there is any documentation that is missing that is non-material, say you forgot a form or you forgot one of the threshold requirement documentations, then I will allow you 3 business days to submit that to me. That's why I say that you need to have someone as a contact who's easily contacted and will respond immediately. It can't be anything that you.
Lindsay, is that automatic or is that at the discretion of the department?
It's at the discretion of the department. Yeah.
So just to clarify, there may be a cure period. So it's very important to make sure you do not miss any documents, because if it's just one agency that's missing a document, the cure period may not exist. We typically receive a high volume of applications, so please make sure everything is submitted.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not a given. So just make sure that you try to do it everything the first time. And it can't be anything material. When I say material, you can't submit a new content narrative and change what you wrote in the first narrative. It can only be something that is like a form or something that's missing. It's not the content that can be changed. And I think that is all that I had. Melody or Jerry, can you think of something I've missed? Okay, so we're going to do a question and answers. I know we already have some questions in the chat. And again, these questions will be posted in the letter of clarification and posted on the website.
So I can take the first couple ones. One of the questions was, what is the administrative percentage limitation for the budget? It should be no more than 15%. It doesn't have to be 15%, it can be 10%, but it should be no more than 15% of the budget. Can client eligibility be determined geographically, or must it be determined based on the individual income? For instance, can documenting that a client resides in a zip code that is 80% or greater LMI be sufficient for determining economic eligibility? Or if a school-age client attends a school with a student body that is 80% or greater LMI? So this is not a black and white question, so it's not a yes or no. Most of our, so if you want to, you are more than welcome, and I strongly suggest you go and look at the regulations under CDBG Public Services, particularly limited clientele. So limited clientele is part of meeting that national objective of the 80% or below LMI. And there are different ways to calculate if somebody is eligible, and there is what we call area benefit. It will determine on your type of project of what, if you can use it geographically. You cannot switch between 1 and 2. So if your project is a LMA, low moderate area, you can't do some clients LMA and some clients LMI. The other thing is there's, under the CDBG regulations, there is a presumed benefit. So some individuals are presumed to be low to moderate income. And of those individuals, as long as you're able to certify that they meet one of those thresholds, then they would you would have to collect income documentation. But do remember that the funding that is within this NOFA is not just CDBG. We're asking that every project meet CDBG eligibility. And just because it meets eligibility doesn't mean that the same documentation threshold for CDBG is going to be the same document threshold for ESG or HHSP or any other funding stream that we feel is appropriate for this program. Agencies do not select what funding stream they're going to be using. It is the department, based on your program and your application, that we will select the most efficient and most best use of the funds. So hopefully that answers that question.
Can I elaborate just a little bit more? If you are going to use low mod area benefit as your national objective, the data source that we use is provided by HUD, and that is based on census data, and that uses the tracts and block groups with LMI percentages and demographic data published by HUD. So that is the data source that we use. The GIS team will evaluate that. If you are using low mod area benefit, you must clearly define your service area. You need to provide us a clear map with clear boundaries that says, here is the area that we are serving. Please do not provide just a list of zip codes. It needs to be, these streets or something we use, that we can easily map and that we can share with the GIS team. There shouldn't be any ambiguity related to it. So the service area has to be clearly defined, and then we need to be able to map that and see which block groups and tracks it falls within, and then do the analysis to see if it's majority low mod. And that means that the majority of the service area has to be at least 51% low to moderate income or greater, and it must be majority like residential. So you can't claim like a bunch of the ship channel, which is all industry, basically has no residents, and it may be low mod, but we're not allowed to claim that because, again, it must be majority residential area as well.
Yeah, so downtown is a really hard area. It's almost virtually impossible to use LMA downtown. There's not enough rooftops. The third question that I received was, is it building use or rent an eligible cost? Well, is it a cost that is associated with the program? And so that's what we're looking for. And then how do you do that, right? Is that 100%? Is that 20%? So building use and rent for your program is eligible. You just have to show us how you're allocating that. The cover page of the NOFA already addresses says that the questions are due on January 17th, but page 10 says January 20th. It is January 17th. I also clarified that in chat. I'll come down. When we submit documents on base about when can we expect the confirmation email to come through, is this immediate or does it take some time? I don't actually know the answer. Do either of you know the answer?
I'm gonna defer to Lindsay on that one.
I'm sorry, I was reading some of the other questions. I'm sorry, which one were we on?
The confirmation email when they upload to OnBase.
So what I've been told is it should come within the next 30 minutes. That's what it typically does. That's why I said if you don't get it, just reach out to me, because I don't know that it's always set in stone. So the system can be a little finicky. So if you don't get it in 30 minutes, shoot me an email or give me a call.
Do we accept, or do you accept NICRA rates? That is the negotiated indirect cost rate agreement. That is a federal document. Yes, we absolutely do. But again, you cannot do an indirect cost rate and an allocated administrative cost. It's one or the other. We also will need to see that particular document, so you will want to submit that document to show us. Now, if your NICRA rate is 18%, you're not getting 18% of the grant. You're getting up to, we want to see that admin portion no more than 15%. And so you can use it, but you're only going to get 15% of the agreement towards administrative cost. Well, we need to deliver a hard copy to the city secretary as well as the online submission. Absolutely not. We don't accept any hard copies moving forward. Will you accept joint applications? No. So it's no. You can have an application in which you use other services from other providers, but we're looking to see what that cost is. If you are using other providers, how did you procure those providers? We will want to see if there was a NOFA or RFP that was issued by the agency. So remember, these agreements that awardees that are, or applicants that are awarded there's subrecipient agreements, which means that all federal rules that apply to the city of Houston now apply to the awardee. So it will apply to the awardee, and you become a subrecipient and you're bound by those rules. Will you accept multiple applications from one agencies? Sure. Doesn't mean that all applications will be approved. Low and moderate up to 80% or less than 80%. Childcare facilities need licenses. Clarify results and evaluations. 2 years of balance sheet and income statement or current one. Will the application portal say previous submissions? The application portal will not receive or not save previous submissions, so you have to have everything ready when you submit. I'm not quite sure on the questions. So childcare facility needs license. All childcare facilities need licenses. So we would need to see that. And then your results and evaluations, what results, like what are you doing to maintain your program as success? So there should be some data. If your program doesn't have any data, then why are you continuing to fund it? Like what is the reason that our tax dollars should be going to this program? Your 2 year, it needs to be the, not your balance sheet or income statements, but your audit, your financial audit. Is your organization, what we're looking for in the financial audit is your organization financially secure? And that's part of the risk evaluation that the city of Houston does.
And I believe it is if you've received over $750,000 in federal funds, then you're required to have a single audit. If your organization is smaller and you've not exceeded that threshold of 750,000, then we will accept, if you've had an audit done, or if you have your balance, what your bookkeeper or what your accountant, what you do to manage your finances and keep records of that. So it could be a balance sheet, it could be some other form that is not as detailed as a single audit. We would prefer a single audit because those have a structure to them. We know the format. But again, if we have smaller agencies, we understand, provide us the best you can. And if you need to put like a cover sheet or an additional item in there explaining what this is, we'll always welcome that.
Yeah, so this shouldn't just be like the executive director, our balance is good, we pay our bills on time, we're okay. Like that's not sufficient. There needs to be something that shows the financial health of your organization. If you upload a file to OnBase, is it locked in or can you delete it out or change it to replace it?
So as soon as you hit submit, then you can't change anything. In fact, you can't access your application anymore at all. You can't go back and change anything. Now, if you have it on the screen and you upload a document and you move to the next one, you think, oh, that's the wrong one. You can go back, click on the button and upload a different document. But once you hit submit, that's when it's kind of locked in.
So we have the environmental review question. Can you give guidance on environmental review? Is there a contact person to assist with that? Is environmental review done after approval of funding? So all federal funds from HUD require an environmental review. This is done after we have made the recommendation for award prior to going to City Council. So it is in your application or in your instructions. This is not anything you're doing. Yeah, it's not anything you're going to do with this particular application. But before we can assign any federal funds to a project, we do that, and that is an internal process on our side. But we do mention it because it is a federal requirement, and we want everyone to be aware of it.
And I will add, if the environmental review reveals something that we need to mitigate, then we may have to adjust your program. It could be your site is located in the floodway or floodplain, and you have to maintain flood insurance, or if it's in the floodway, I don't think we can fund that. Or there could be some type of other issue. The building has environmental contamination where you're operating or something, and we need to address that. But that will be performed by our team, and then if we need to adjust the project, we'll negotiate that with you and with the findings.
I would say that with public service type projects, it's very, very rare. I've been here 17 years and we haven't had that issue, but there's always a first. I've learned. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions? Even if you didn't type it in, if you want to unmute.
Hey, Lindsay.
Yes.
So what if, hypothetical, what if an agency uploads their application and then they realize, oh, I forgot a whole section or I forgot to attach something? Should they reach out to you or should they just upload again?
What they can do is they can upload again, and then they can reach out to me and let me know which application they want to submit. So as long as it's before that 3 p.m. deadline, then I can go into the system and delete the one that was like a mistake or whatever. So they just need to immediately let me know, like, oh, I accidentally put a submission in, and that's not my actual application. Anything before that 3 p.m. deadline is fine.
Okay.
So the question was also like, how do I verify that we're in the city of Houston? You can look at your tax documents. You can go to HCAD. There's also part of Houston sits in Fort Bend. So you're looking for the city taxes as well as Jared has a good source.
So there is if you Google, it's called Houston Map Viewer. It is a way you can enter your address and it will let you know if you are in the city of Houston city limits or not. It'll basically, you enter an address and it'll say like city services full or limited or none at all. So you can also use that to see if you're within the city limits. So, but on your tax statements, if you pull your HCAD, if you're paying city of Houston taxes, and that's a clear line, says city of Houston, then you are located within the city of Houston.
Melody or Lindsay, this is Rolanda Clements Martin from Catholic Charities. In your presentation, you indicated that if there has been any interaction with grants through your division, other grants that you funded, or if there's some work that someone on your team has done with some other projects, how do you document that in this grant application?
That's part of your narrative. So in that other NOFA documentation, the agency will respond to the narrative and indicate that.
Okay, thank you.
If it's very lengthy, tables are always helpful too.
Okay, thank you.
Melody, could I ask, if you have contracts with the city, does that represent a conflict of interest?
No.
Okay.
Most all of our agencies that are funded currently will probably apply, and so then no, that does not. A conflict of interest is when you have a relationship, like my husband is going to apply for funding. That's a conflict of interest. Or somebody is married to a council member, or there's a council member on your board. There's a city of Houston employee on your board, or one of your employees is married to a director of the health department, or the director of public works, or a deputy assistant director of public works. So the conflict is, how are you? There's the relationship between your organization and the city of Houston. And it doesn't mean that there's a true conflict. There may be just a perception of conflict, and that's why you're going to fill out that form. So then we will go behind that form and verify, is it a true conflict? And just because it could be a conflict doesn't mean that it prohibits you from applying or being awarded. A lot of times we just have to disclose the conflict in a public forum like housing committee or city council, and then we move forward. But so it's not an easy question to answer because there's a lot of ifs and buts. But go ahead and fill out that form. Even if you think it is and it truly isn't, we'll let you know. Like, oh, that's not a conflict.
And I was going to say something about the no contact period. If you already have a relationship, like a contract or an agreement with anyone at the city, you can reach out to them regarding that other contract or agreement. It's only you're not allowed to talk to them about this particular NOFA.
Correct. And for those who have worked with us long enough, we're not going to answer the question.
I think we just got a question.
Yeah, but that's from Strategic Purchasing Division. So I don't know. I think that's you. It's more you, Lindsay. So the NOFA mentions that housing placement is through the Coalition for the Homeless. Does that mean that rent assistance to clients is only provided by the coalition? Agencies then only do case management. That is correct. This particular NOFA does not provide any type of rent assistance. Let me make sure that's correct. Yeah, that should be correct. And when we talk about our homelessness, we work through the Way Home system. It is a model that we collaboratively work with through Houston and Harris County and our lead agency, which is the coalition. We do all of our homeless assistance through that system. So we're not doing side doors. We're not providing rent assistance to an agency to provide rapid rehousing. If we have specific requests, there will probably be another solicitation for that. But no, so for this particular NOFA, you're talking about the case management, you're talking about the wraparound services that are related to that rent assistance that is provided elsewhere. So typically there's COC rent projects and they need additional support, or some people may have SAMHSA grants or ESG grants. It's dependent on it. So I want to right. We're not doing rent.
No, not in this. No, I'm none of the eligible activities that we've listed, because I mean, if we did with ESG being an option, but that would be more of,
It would be case management.
yeah.
Can an employee be an alternate on a city board or commission? That's a legal question, and I'm not a lawyer. So again, fill out the conflict of interest form. I have been told by my lawyer not to give legal advice, so I'm not going to.
Let me answer the question about the website. So I do see what the person is asking. So we use the procurement website for our NOFA process, but our NOFA process is not what you would consider a formal procurement, like an RFP or a invitation to bid. So that language really applies to how the procurement division uses that website usually. So our case is a little different because this is a NOFA specific to our department. So with the new policies in place, the city secretary no longer receives the NOFA applications.
And then just to go back to Hannah's question about the city board or commission, I am not an attorney, so I will not answer that. But what I will say is that we do have agencies that have board members that are city council members, that are that work in other city departments in higher level positions. So but again, it's filling out that conflict of interest. So I don't want anyone to be shy about applying because you have a board member that, like, all of a sudden you think, oh man, this might be it might be a conflict, but that just because it's a conflict doesn't necessarily preclude you from receiving funds. What is the grant period for this NOFA? So it's on the summary page. It's a 1 year, it's 12 months with a 12-month renewal. And when we start to award agencies, we will start with the higher awardees, like the higher scores. We will start contacting them first to get agreements, or we will start with the agencies that are currently funded and are about to expire, right? So that there's not a gap in services. So we'll do it simultaneously. Yes, all the forms are located on our website, the area in which Lindsay showed earlier. And so it's all the NOFA documents are together.
Melody?
Mm-hmm.
I am shy about applying. I have a question. As a newer organization, we get, when it comes to the section where you're asking about other
3-month cash flow
financiers, or yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
We've had private entities to give us funds. So we've had one big grant from Freddie Mac. And then other than that, we'll have smaller businesses in the area. We do a lot of financial literacy events at churches and schools in the neighborhoods. Would it be necessary for us to apply at this point? I just wanted to kind of get on and get the information, or are we too new, or what direction would you tell me?
When it comes to the financial capacity, this is a reimbursement grant only. So this goes for everyone, whether you're new or seasoned. And so when you apply for funding, and I've seen this with agencies, they apply for the max. And so I forget the max here. Is it 250?
250,000.
So 250,000. So great. it's $250,000. We're going to apply for it. This is going to be amazing. What we don't see a lot of individuals do is then go, okay, so that $250,000, what's 25% of that? That's 62,500. That's what an organization has to have on hand so that they can manage their cash flow at that level. And so if you get money from private entities, you have a line of credit, you know, whatever that is, that's what we're looking for. So we're going to actually do that calculation. We're going to be looking for that that 25% of the funds. If it's not there, you don't meet threshold. So for newer agencies, I would say our floor is $100,000. So take 25% of that $100,000, and that's what you need to have in the bank to apply. And if you don't have that, then I would strongly consider you not applying. But this is why, like, we're not trying to penalize newer agencies. Because this is a reimbursement basis, we'll pretend that the contract starts January 1. That first reimbursement is due on February 20th. So that means that the agency has already gone nearly 2 months on their own funds because it is, again, reimbursement. We've tried to set up a system in which we can get that reimbursement to you guys by the end of the 3rd month. So by the time you receive the first month's reimbursement, we're already at the end of March. And this is why we require the 3-month cash flow. I have seen organizations fold because they didn't have the proper cash flow. And we can't work any faster. And it is unfortunate that we are only doing this through a reimbursement basis. I understand the struggle, but there's also a lot of risk involved both at our level and at the federal level when we do cash advance. So I hope that answers your question and gives insight to
It
why we
does.
do it.
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Additional questions?
All right, we answered the grant period. Our forms we answered that. Is there an earlier deadline before the end of 12 months by which a certain percentage of the grant needs to already be spent? So maybe I can't really answer that question accurately at this moment because I don't know what types of funds we're going to put into each contract. So all of our contracts, and Jared touched on it lightly earlier, have deadlines. Everything has a deadline. We always look at when we engage with you and you say, this is what I need for 12 months, we expect a 1/12 spin rates. And that doesn't mean that every single month has to be 1/12, but that's the average. And so we'll let you know, hey, you're behind or you have accelerated your spending. You might run out of money before the end of 12 months. There are some grants that we have access to, and we may say, like, this is the only money we have available, but you have to spend 80% of this money by this date because it's tied to that specific funding stream. So I can't answer that question as of right now if we have any of those, but that will be part of the negotiations once an agency has gone through the NOFA process, been awarded, and we're interested in moving forward to City Council.
And I'd just like to elaborate a little bit that if your program is designed to where maybe it's cyclical or it's seasonal, you know, you go through, like, we do a 3-month training program. And so you do a ramp up, you serve for 3 months, and then you bring in a new cohort or something, you know, clearly explain that, you know, the program operates, here's the design, and, you know, we'll have expenditures where, you know, it would be like 2 to 3 months of expenditures, and then maybe there's a drop off for a month of recruitment, and then the next wave comes in and we start serving. Just clearly explain that. That helps us understand how your operations are, how the program is designed, and, you know, how it will impact your spending, and to where you may need a month or 2 as a ramp up period. You know, we like these to be as ready to go as possible, but if you're proposing something unique or serving clientele that maybe has, you know, been underserved in the past, clearly explain that. You know, it may take a little bit of time to ramp up. And therefore, by month 3, we think we'll be fully staffed and expending funds or something like that. But the more information you can provide us and the clearer it is, because all we have to go on is what you give us in these applications. We're not going to reach out and ask you to clarify other than that cure period that Lindsay talked about, if that is offered. It is what you give us that the evaluators are going to look at is what is in the application. That's all the information. They're not going to go on a website. They're not going to research your agency. They're only going to use that information.
And your evaluators are not going to be people you've had a relationship with. So your RMs will not be evaluating, your funding specialists will not be evaluating. So the current people that you know are not evaluating this. So it's very important to paint that clear picture. About what date would the decision be made, then agencies be alerted, and around what date would the funding begin? My hope is that by the end of the second quarter, we should be able to notify agencies, hopefully before the end of the second quarter. And funding will begin, that's all dependent. At that point, once we notify agencies, we will start negotiating contracts, and negotiations can take, a month, 3 months. It usually, just for everyone's information, when we go to city council, there are a couple of steps. And I think once we mapped it out, and I think 24 people touch documents to get to city council. But first we negotiate the contract. Your budgets are, whatever you submit is never going to be the final budget. You may put in, this is what our wish list is, and we're like, that's awesome and that's amazing. It's not eligible. We don't have enough money to do this, whatever the reason is. We negotiate, we get to an agreement. At that point, we then send it to our internal project review committee, which only meets once a month, and that's the beginning of the month. Then after that, it goes to housing committee, which everyone will be required to attend if you make it to housing committee. If you do not attend, we will not present your project. Then after housing committee, it goes directly to city council, usually about a week later. And so once it goes to city council, hopefully it won't be tagged, because if it is tagged, that's a 1 week delay. Once it's approved at city council, then the contracts have to be countersigned, and that can take up to 10 business days. Countersignature is what creates the active contract, and that is the countersignature by the city controller. So you may be awarded, or you may be notified that we are interested in awarding you. And I say that because the only entity that is able to actually award an agreement is city council. And then from there, it could be an additional 3 months to get to city council. All right, I think that's it. I've answered, I think, everything, and we are like right on time. We have like 4 minutes left. Any last minute questions? And if you can't think of any, but like in 2 minutes or 5 minutes, you're like, oh my gosh, I should have asked this, please send that question to Lindsay, and we will respond, and we will put it on our website. Everything you need is on our website.
Thanks, everyone. Again, if you have any questions, just send them to me.